Arizona basketball is one of the preeminent forces in putting really good college players into the NBA. How big of a recruiting tool is that going to be for Tommy Lloyd with this roster and with moving forward?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, we got a lot to get to on this show. We are, again, locked on your team every day. We're going to talk all about the NBA, what that means for the U of A. I mean, U of A does have one of the top five. It's one of the top five programs for feeding guys into the NBA that there is, and how we got there, what that means, and kind of a little bit of a history. But first, let's just talk a little bit about the history that unfolds here with Arizona and, the way that it's been. Lute Olson was a master at putting guys into the NBA. He did a very, very good job of it. You look at it historically, you started off Sean Elliott was obviously a really, really big one, top 3 pick. Then after that, you had other guys too, lottery picks, your Khalid Reeves, your Damon Stoudemire's. And then after a while, it became kind of an assembly line of players. It became your especially at point guard. You had Damon Stoudemire, who was rookie of the year. Then you had, after that, you had Reggie Geary, who played in the league for a couple of years. Then you had Mike Bibby. Then you had Jason Terry. Then you just keep going on and on down the list. You had Jared Bayless as well. It was like I said, it was a pretty good look for Arizona. And after that, I think a lot of people were concerned. They're like, well, is Arizona going to become a one-coach school? And to his credit, Sean Miller did not allow that one to occur. Sean Miller, he didn't elevate it, but he made Arizona still a top 3 to 4 recruiting program in the entire country. He did a really, really good job of it. And you look at some of the players that he put into the NBA. Some guys panned out, some guys didn't, but there was a lot of lottery picks involved in there. There was a Derek Williams. There was a Stanley Johnson. There was a Lowry Markkanen, obviously, Aaron Gordon, DeAndre Ayton. I can keep going on and on. He put a lot of guys into the league. And guess what? Kids like that. At the end of the day, kids want to play in the NBA. There's no doubt about it. Kids want to play in the NBA, and if you make that happen, then again, that's going to be a pretty good situation for you. But yeah, that's kind of where it looks at from that perspective. Now, Tommy Lloyd comes along, my friends, and you could say, well, some of the players I'm going to mention probably, Tommy Lloyd didn't recruit him, but they certainly elevated their game in a big way under Tommy Lloyd, and I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. First one, obviously, is Ben Mathurin. Ben Mathurin, like I said, I thought coming out of college that he was going to be able to be a fringe NBA All-Star. Maybe he still will be. I mean, I love Ben. He can score the ball. He can do a lot of different things. Ben Mathurin is good at basketball. How about that one? But the thing you also got to look at, though, is, he's still he's top 6 pick. That's good. Then after that, you got Dalen Terry. Now, Dalen Terry really hasn't developed into a top-tier NBA type player. And I don't know that anybody should really be super surprised by that, because he didn't necessarily have a skill set that 100% identified with, that's where you're going to be able to plug and play him. Somewhat like a Carter Bryant, for example. Carter Bryant, you knew exactly that he was going to be able to be that guy because, again, he could be 3 and D. But that was that's kind of where it's at with those guys. And then after that, you can really give Tommy some credit. Somebody like a Pella Larson, he got Pella into the NBA. And when Pella came here, Pella couldn't dribble, and Pella certainly didn't look like an NBA player. But Pella's in the NBA, and Pella's probably going to be in the NBA for probably the next, 7, 8, 9 years. He is going to make a lot of money in the league. Keyshawn Johnson is another example of just where he's been able to develop guys. With Keyshawn, you watch Keyshawn for a few minutes, and he probably shouldn't be in the NBA. But Tommy, with the way that Tommy recruits, with the way that he develops players, that became a real recruiting tool almost immediately. Because listen, when Keyshawn Johnson was at San Diego State, he was essentially a junkyard dog. He was a tough dude, more of a jack of all trades type. But like I said, you go into a game, he was probably going to get you 6 points, 6 boards, something like that. At Arizona, he became more of an 11-6 guy, and they allowed him to showcase and shoot the three, which is a big thing. Watching Keyshawn, you can just tell that his game was able to expand a little bit more, and I think that's something that probably we also take a little bit for granted as well. But Keyshawn, obviously a stud. So Tommy Lloyd's got that in his track record of putting guys in the league. So why wouldn't you really want to play in a situation like that? And then Carter Bryant comes in here as a top 25 NBA or top 25 high school prospect. And after a year of averaging 6 and 4, he's off, and he's a lottery pick for the San Antonio Spurs. So, be that as it may. Now, let's talk about this current roster, though, and where this all plays out, because that's, to me, where this is all fascinating as well. You watch this current roster, and there's going to be some guys that are definitely going to play in the NBA. And again, not really breaking any news there. So the first thing that I want to talk about, though, is where exactly is this team then? Who are the guys that are no-brainer first-round picks? And the first one is Koa Pete. You got to give Tommy Lloyd a ton of credit for what he was able to do with Koa Pete. There were a lot of people, and I don't think I'm breaking any news here, but I don't believe that Koa grew up wanting to be an Arizona Wildcat. I don't think, most Phoenix kids grow up wanting to be an Arizona Wildcat. I don't know that Koa was that guy. I really don't. I actually don't think he was that guy. But like I said, be that as it may, Koa was still a priority pick for Arizona, and they were able to make it happen. Koa could have gone to Houston. Koa could have gone anywhere in the country. I mean, if you watch Koa for 5 minutes, you could just tell that Koa is a little bit different. And if Koa is the best big man freshman in all of college basketball this coming year, I would not be in the least bit surprised by that. And quite frankly, nobody else should be either, because again, he's got that type of game to him. He's got that type of, he's big, he's physical. And, while a lot of people are getting older across the board when it comes to the portal, Tommy Lloyd's getting a little bit younger. And I like it, though, as long as I like the strategy of what he's doing there. And I think the interesting part about it is getting the right guys, though. When you're going to get the right guys, you want to get guys that are physically more mature. And the first thing is, if you look at Koa Pete, he might not be a top 3 pick because he's already he's really, really mature for his age. But you can also see somebody that will be there and will probably be he'll probably be a guy that, when the chips are down, he's probably going to average 14-8, 15-7, something like that. He's got a world of, college potential. And honestly, if you're Arizona, that's all you're really recruiting for. Don't really care about the other stuff. So, like I said, that's an interesting aspect to this. And, when you look in the portal, a lot of times you're going to get guys that are a little bit more physically developed, but, maybe not be able to, they don't maybe have that elite upside. You look at Keyshawn Johnson, for example, and this isn't a diss towards Keyshawn, but Keyshawn's in the NBA. And Keyshawn will probably be in the NBA for a while. But Keyshawn came in and, Tommy Lloyd squeezed everything out of him, but Keyshawn was still kind of an 11-5 guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he also wasn't the one that generally when the chips were down, you're going to say, all right, just give the ball to Keyshawn and let him dominate. That wasn't really his game. Koa Pete is a different animal. Koa Pete's going to be the guy that you're going to say, get the ball to him, let him make his moves, and then just kind of get out of the way and make this one happen. And that's where I think, Arizona is in with a lot of this. And that's why I think it's going to be fascinating to watch, like I said, how this all does unfold. So now the other thing too that we got to talk about though with Koa is also really, really good for the branding. Koa is awesome for the branding. When you watch him, you can just tell that, this is a guy that, kids in the state of Arizona have known who he was since he was in basically like 5th grade. He's bigger than everybody else. He's more athletic than everybody else. And he's just better than everybody else. Everybody knows who Koa Pete is. And like I said, there's a reason for that because he is good, but he's also kind of a prodigy in that regard. And that's something that, like I said, I think you watch and you're just kind of like, all right, I could see that, why he would be that type of dude. And I think that's what's exciting about watching all of this. Now, the next step, though, for Arizona, though, is to get that next level elite NBA player, which I don't know that is necessarily that far off. But first, prize picks, my friends. Prize picks. Okay, here's the deal with prize picks. First of all, this is the time of the year. You got to download the app first, though. You got to be smart about it. Download the app, and then you get to the prize, and then you get prize picks. But here's the deal. This episode is brought to you today by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that for your football predictions, and you can turn them into a rewards. That's the great part about it. Whether you've got your eye on a big name quarterback or a breakout running back, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in that game. Now, again, I'm really excited for Bijan Robinson this season. I think Bijan Robinson's going to, along with Saquon Barkley, be the two best backs in the league. I want to get in on that one right there. And you can do that. You can check out, where you got and, what he's going to be able to do. Then the flex play option, this is interesting. Listen to this, is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still doubled money. Now, puts their members first, so all withdrawals are safe. Check it out. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Got to do that first. That's code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, now also we got a new one here as well. Let's find this one with its let's see. There we go. DripDrop, baby. All right, check it out. DripDrop. Okay, now, if you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts. You got to stay hydrated. People out there that don't stay hydrated, you're asking for trouble. DripDrop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes at half the sugar of a leading sports drink. That's very, very good. Let's see here. I really like the cherry. The cherry is awesome, and it's always cool to have a few packets in your backpack to just be able to make this happen. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do any of that. Right now, DripDrop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to DripDrop.com and use code LOCKEDONCollege for 20. Oh, wow, that's very, very nice. For 20% off your first order. Check it out. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about where Arizona is. Can Koa Pete be that guy that becomes kind of a frontline NBA player? He's got the potential. He's certainly athletic enough. He's certainly big enough. I think the thing with him, you just got to wonder is his ball handling going to be able to be good enough? If his ball handling can really kind of take that next step, then I think he can definitely be that guy. And I think that's what you're excited about if you're an Arizona fan is that that's kind of where we're at with this one. Now, the next one, though, is Braden Burries. Braden Burries is very interesting in all of this. Braden Burries is obviously really, really good. But he also kind of fits in with that Koa Pete realm, and that he is a little bit, how do I put this? He is a little bit, he's more mature. He's going to be 20 before the season starts. And you look at him, I mean, he's been able to be very, very good at a variety of different things. So there's that. Now, I think the one thing is, you watch him and he's just ready to play. He's ready to score. He's ready to get buckets. Is he a next level athlete? No, but he's got a little bit of James Harden in him. And that he is also he's a player that, he kind of relies. He's not going to go in there necessarily jump all over you, but he's going to dunk, and he's basically going to be the guy that you watch and you're like, okay, cool. He just got to the basket. He got by his guy. He slid by his guy, and he made a play. That's kind of what you're going to be getting out of Braden Burries. And when you watch, like I said, when you watch Braden Burries, you can see that he's pretty much cut up for that type of situation. He is a good basketball player, and he's going to be able to play a little bit of point. And he's also going to be able to be the guy that, you watch him and you're just kind of like, all right, what is that next, what's that next step for him? And I don't know exactly, but I do believe he's going to be one of the best freshman guards in the country. That is a big, big thing in all of this. Being one of the best freshman guards in the country, he's also a guy that, like I said, he's going to be another good recruiting tool for Arizona. And I will say this, he is a player that, while I don't know that he's not going to have the upside that somebody like like Caleb Love had, because Caleb Love, there were nights when you knew going into a game that Caleb Love was going to be the best player in America. He had that type of game. He had those type of performances. I don't know that Braden's going to be that, but I also don't know that Braden's not going to be somebody that can be like how do I put this? Can be he's going to have, I think he'll have a higher floor. How about that? I don't think you're going to have as many 3 for 12 games where you're just kind of like, all right, well, what's going on out here? This isn't what I like to see. Things like that. But I also believe he's going to be a first-round pick. I think it was, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was the Ringer, but they had him as rated as the 9th best prospect in the country. If you got 2 top 10 picks in Koa Pete and Braden Burries, that makes things a lot easier to be able to deal with. And I think that's kind of where we're at with that one. Now, the next thing, though, that I also think is very funny and interesting in this, though, is you got those 2 guys, and I expect them, honestly, maybe Jaden Bradley in there. I mean, who knows? With Tommy's track record, maybe it's somebody else as well. But I will say that I think those are the 2 guys that are, right at the top of that list. And then after that, I think Jaden Bradley, as far as not an NBA prospect, but a really good college player, I think he's right in there as well. So those are the guys that you kind of look at. And you're kind of like, all right, that's we're going to take inventory on. But now there's another one as well that we got to talk about, and that's Dwayne Aristode. I believe if Dwayne Aristode is a first-round pick was a first-round pick at this time next year, it wouldn't really surprise me, to be honest with you. I watch him and I see somebody that's a monster. I watch him and he is like I said, he's next level. He was a top 12 to 14 prospect in the class before he got hurt. Then they dropped him to 30. You watch him. He's a great athlete. He can really handle the ball. Not only can he really handle the ball, he's a good passer. He's shown a developing shot, so we'll see how that plays out. But I also don't know that this isn't going to be a player that, like I said, when you watch him and you're just kind of like, oh, wow. You're looking across, you're like, man, is this guy the best NBA prospect on the team? He might be. And, that's kind of the exciting part about this. Tommy brought in a lot of studs. Tommy brought in guys, I think with 3 guys that I think 2 of them are locks to be in the first round. And if one guy plays up to his potential, he's probably going to be a first rounder as well. I mean, but when you look at it, Tommy Lloyd has always been somebody that does a very good job taking inventory of what he does, what he needs to do. There were some guys that you watched and you're like, all right, well, it's just not a good fit. And he generally figured it out after the season, maybe a little too late, but he figured it out. Kind of like with recruiting, though, now he knew that he needed to target this class, and he was going to be that guy. So, like I said, this is going to be an interesting situation to see how this all does play out for Arizona, because Arizona's in pretty good shape. But there's also a spot too where you can watch them and be like, all right, this is going to be a good team. Now I'm going to say this though. Let's talk a little bit then about what this all means for Tommy Lloyd, because there are some interesting aspects to all of this and what he can do as far as the recruiting trail hits. But first, open my phone, my friend. Open phone. Okay, if you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? No. And you probably not. I don't. You moved on, because, again, your time is precious as well. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones to just keep business and personal calls separate? OpenPhone solves that instantly. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this or something like that. And the AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, all of that. It's great. See why over 60,000 businesses trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. That's a very cool little thing right there. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, the thing about Tommy Lloyd is this, and we talked about it before, but with the Koa Pete, you watch with Koa Pete and you watch him, and he was a guy that Arizona needed to get for a variety of reasons. The first one, though, is like I say, or not the first one, but one of them is that he's very well thought of throughout the Arizona basketball scene. Everybody knows who Koa Pete is. Koa Pete is good. Everybody knows that. So that's obviously an aspect to this that you got to keep in mind. Now, the other thing, too, with Mr. Koa Pete is recruiting in the state of Arizona. He's got a ton of cachet. You watch him, and this state is loaded right now with players that, like I said, this state is loaded right now with players that are, how do I put this? You watch them, and you're just kind of like, okay, cool. Cam Holmes is another one. I expect Cam Holmes to end up at the U of A. They prioritized him from day one. Then you look at some other people. I don't know about Cam Williams. Cam Williams is going to be interesting, the St. Mary's product. But those guys are also going to decide late. What Arizona does with, I think, Koa Pete will also be a very nice reflection for them on how Tommy Lloyd could possibly use them moving forward as well. And so, again, that's kind of a thing that I think you need to keep an eye on. But I think Tommy's going to be a recruiting monster moving forward. He brought in a top 3 class, top 2 class, depending on where you look at this past year. But after that, I think it's going to be more of the same. 2026, everybody says it's not as loaded at the top. Fine. But I still believe he's going to be bringing in a top 5 class. I think you're going to be looking at guys like a Cam. I think you're going to be looking at somebody like a Cam Holmes, and a Kenna Alozi. I think you're also going to be looking at somebody like a, hopefully a Cam Williams, somebody like that. But I think that's I think that's kind of like a situation though where we're like, okay, cool. Let's see how this one does play out, and we shall be good to go. I am excited though to see also with this squad and what that means then for next year, because you're going to also have some guys coming back that I think are going to be pretty talented guys. You got an Yvonne who's you've got an Yvonne who is, like I said, is going to be, I think, a pretty good player for Arizona. It's also going to be really, really excited to see exactly how this all does play out. But overall, Arizona, good stuff all the way across the board. Now, recruiting wise, though, and then you look into 2027, Arizona, if Diggs reclassifies, if, like Bruce Branch stays there, they're going to continue to do well. Tommy's got this one down. Plus, you got to remember, too, that recruiting the right kind of high school players matters, because NIL, these kids obviously want to get paid. I don't blame any of them, but it also goes to kind of the fit, though, as to how, how Arizona is, like I said, how Arizona is going to play this one. And that's, like I said, that's kind of what's exciting about this. Arizona, though, is in really, really good shape. And the in-state, California, you see it, all of that. So we shall see. But tomorrow, though, we're going to talk about Arizona and the NFL. Arizona, like I said, I don't know if anybody saw it. We're going to talk about it more, but Shakori Krosky-Merritt is becoming a monster for the university, or for Washington. He's expected to start at running back. He had a nice touchdown run yesterday. He was one of those guys you could just tell when he was here, he was a little bit different. What could Arizona have been with him? Certainly wouldn't have hurt. How about that? But he's showing out. T-Mac's being T-Mac. Obviously, you got Big Jonas Savanea starting at guard. You've got Tyler Loop doing Tyler Loop things. You've also got Jordan Morgan, who I think is on the verge of becoming a Pro Bowler type for the Green Bay Packers as well. Maybe a guy like Jacob Cowing can make that next move. But Arizona's got a lot of guys in the NFL. It's a pretty cool thing to watch, just kind of, how this is developed, how this is played out. And, like I said, I realize that they're not really Brent Brennan's guys outside of JCM, but it's still a good recruiting tool. First round picks the last couple of years shows that you come to Arizona, you can make a play like that happen. And if a guy like T-Mac can come to Arizona, then you can definitely make that one as well. But wanted to break this all down. Arizona recruiting, where it's at with these players, these 5-star kids, and how everything can play out from there. But as always, though, very, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Locked On, your team every day. And keep in mind, like I said, this basketball recruiting thing, this thing's just getting started. This is going to be a program moving forward that I think is going to be recruiting at a top 5 level. They get it. He's got a staff that works hard. They got money and they develop players. But on that note, we will be back with you tomorrow talking Arizona and the NFL prospects.